Okay, it is 4 o'clock, so I'm going to begin. Welcome everybody to the IRIS International Film Club. Very exciting new initiative that we've had become very successful during COVID, which, one of the benefits anyway. My name is Mary McCoy, and my job at UW-Madison is I coordinate outreach for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. But this is an IRIS event, and so today's talk and film, the sponsor is the Institute for Regional and International Studies, National Resource Center, IRIS, NRC. And NRC Outreach, IRIS NRC Outreach supports international and global awareness and inspires informed thinking about the complexities of our world by providing resources and expertise to K-12 teachers and students, and also to post-secondary educators and their students and the community at large. So again, I'm from the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, which is a center which has faculty and staff and students who are scholars on Southeast Asia, and we also have resources for teachers and community members on Southeast Asia if you're ever interested in doing anything on one of these countries or the region. Carmen Pitts will be running tech support, so if you have any challenges, use the chat function to contact her. We will be recording today's event, and then we'll be sharing the link as a digital resource in a post-event email tomorrow. You will only show up on the recording if your microphone is turned on to speak, so keep that in mind. I would like to introduce our speaker today, who I've known for quite a while, and I've always been very impressed by her. Her name is Luh Gede Sri Pratiwi, just Sri for short, and she's an incoming doctoral student, just beginning in the history department in fall at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and she'll be researching the religiosity of Bali within the context of external and internal colonialism during the 20th century. She received her master's degree in Southeast Asian Studies right here in our program in 2019, following 7 years of ethnographic fieldwork. And she did that fieldwork in Indonesia with Elemental Productions, helping to create award-winning documentaries such as Bitter Honey and Tajen Interactive. And I've seen Tajen, and it's a phenomenal film. So we will have our talk, and then afterwards, around 30 to 40 minutes in, Sri will give we'll have our film first, and then 34 minutes in, we'll have Sri's presentation on the film Ngaben, which is Ngaben, Emotion and Restraint in a Balinese Heart, and the work with ethnographical documentaries with Elemental Productions. And then at 4:35, 4:40-ish, we will have time for Q&A, and at that time we will encourage you to enter questions in the chat box. But if you have questions during the film, feel free to also enter those questions into the chat box, and we'll read them once the presentation is over. And then at 4:55, we'll begin to wrap up discussion, and we'll let you continue with your evening. So with no further ado, I would like to turn the mic over to Sri Pratiwi, and we will then, yes, and with her presentation on the film today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I'm going to share my presentation. I hope it looks okay. So once again, thank you, Mary, for the introduction. I also would like to thank IRIS NRC, Carmen, also Shanad and Leslie for giving me the opportunity to share my experience in filmmaking and to talk about one of the films that we have produced on Bali. So today I will be talking about Elemental Productions, and then I will talk about the film that we all already watch on YouTube. And last, I will talk about my experience filming with Elemental Productions in Bali. Um, so we will start with Elemental Productions. So it is a Los Angeles-based ethnographic documentary film company, which dedicated to the productions of films focusing on the relationship between culture, psychology, and personal experience. It was founded in 2007 by our director, Dr. Robert Lemelson. Uh, Rob is a cultural anthropologist. He's an ethnographic filmmaker and an adjunct professor of anthropology at UCLA. And he's also a visiting professor at USC. His area specialty is transcultural psychiatry, Southeast Asian studies, particularly Indonesia, and psychological and medical anthropology. So since 2007, we have produced over a dozen documentary films for educational purposes. So the process was that the US film crew would visit Indonesia every year, and we have local teams who continue filming throughout the year and maintaining relationship with our film subjects. So here are some of the films that we produced. Some of them are short, like the one that we watch on YouTube, and some other are feature-length film. Our director actually came here to UW-Madison 2 years ago to talk about our latest documentary, Tajen. It is on a Balinese cockfight. And one of the projects actually that I really enjoy making because it's really fun. I meet a lot of people and I learn a lot about the world of cockfighting. All of these films are not produced for commercial purposes because Rob teaches anthropology at UCLA and he used some texts and readings on Indonesia. So he creates all these films to help his students to visually experience what they're reading or studying in class. And if you want to know more about our films, and project, you can check them out at www.elementalproductions.org. Or if you're interested in our sensory ethnographic film on Balinese cockfight, where you can see how Balinese do their cockfighting and through the perspective of the cockfighter and the chicken itself, you can check our website. It's called tajeninteractive.com. So now I'm going to talk about the film that we all have watched on YouTube. It's called Ngaben, Emotion and Restraint in Balinese Heart. So I wasn't involved much in the making of this film because when Rob made this film, I was not yet a member of the film crew. This film was made in 2009, which is precisely a year before I officially worked with Elemental Production. But I was familiar with the people and the crew members who are involved in the making of this film. And I've known Rob since I was 7, so I know everyone who worked with him and all the people that he filmed. So a little historical background here. This film is on Balinese cremation, and Balinese cremation ceremonies are part of Balinese Hinduism, which is the result of a syncretism between local Balinese animist spirituality and cosmology and Hindu beliefs and practices, which were brought to the Indonesian archipelago as early as the 1st century and spread to Bali as early as the 4th century. And then it reached its peaks of influence during the Hindu Majapahit Empire in the 1300s. However, the religion was not evenly spread all over the island. The process of religion dissemination continued when Bali fell under the Dutch colonial government after a bloody war and a mass suicide in 1906. And then the colonial government wanted to make Bali a living museum of Hindu cultures in the archipelago. And it also continued after Indonesia declared its independence in 1945 and become an ongoing process up to today. Um, so what do we have here in this film, Ngaben, Emotion and Restraint in a Balinese Heart? We are introduced to Nyoman, who is the focus of the film. So in my personal opinion, Nyoman is both special, but also an ordinary man. Why do I call him special? It's because he's a very good friend of our director, and they've been working together for more than 25 years. He's a really kind and fun person to work with. And what really matters here is that this long-term relationship actually helped us to make the film more natural. Because when people is close to you and they feel comfortable around you, you can see that they don't try to hide their feelings or emotions when they film them. So doing ethnographic documentary films like this is a little bit difficult because it's not scripted. You need to really gain trust from the people that you film, and they're how you get, once you get their trust, you can get the most honest emotions and answers from your film subject. And for example, like I was working on a documentary film on polygamy in Bali, and it took me about 2 years to finally build trust to the point that the people, the families that we're filming could come to me and tell me their problems and answers my question and show me their feeling about the, the topic that we asked them. But I also said earlier that Nyoman is also an ordinary man. Why I say so? Because actually he's a really perfect example of an ordinary Balinese person who's close, living with his family. He's close to his family. He's a responsible son who respects his father, and he wants to pay his debt the best way he can. So when I say debt here, it doesn't mean that he owes money to anyone. But it's more like a cultural thing in Bali, which I will get back to this later when I explain about the film. So his full name is Inyoman Asub, and a little bit about Balinese name system. It's based on your birth order. So if you have kids, the first kid you would name them Wayan or Putu, and then the second kid you will name them Made. The third kid you will name them Nyoman, and your fourth kid would be Ketut. And if you have fifth kid, you will go back to the first in order, which is Wayan or Putu. So from his name, you can tell that Nyoman Asub, he's a third child in his family. Nyoman is also an entrepreneur. He makes and sells all sort of snacks made out of peanuts. And he's also a driver. Whenever we film in Bali, he would be our lead driver because nobody knows the street in Bali better than Nyoman. So Nyoman comes from a village called Nyanglan, which is located in Klungkung Regency. You can see it, I circled it on the map. One thing that I think is important to tell here, even though Bali is really small, It's like if you cut Wisconsin into Bali size, you will make 29 Balis out of Wisconsin. But Bali is such a diverse place. So you can say that we have the same culture and rituals, but actually the way people practice a particular ritual in two neighboring villages can differ so much. So that is why if you read books on Bali or article on Balinese tradition, the story or impression you get might differ from one author to another, depending on which part of Bali they conduct their research. So the procession that you watch on the documentary film might slightly differ from the way people do it outside Nyoman's village, but in a sense, the ceremony pretty much the same in most villages in Bali. I say most here because there are some old villages that don't cremate corpses. So you can see on this slide, this is a picture from Trunyan village where they do not bury the dead body. They brought them to the forest and placed them under a big ancient banyan-like tree called Tarumanyan, which is also the origin of the name of the village. So it's Tarumanyan, and then they make it into Trunyan. And they say that this big tree has fragrance which could cover the smell of the corpses. So if one day you go to Bali and have the chance to see the ceremony in, say, Denpasar area where I grew up, you might say, oh, they don't have the same salon like what Nyoman had, or the people don't spin the tower the way the people in Nyoman's village did it. Like I said earlier, different places in Bali execute this ritual differently. So, do these differences make this 16 minutes film not worth watching? As a Balinese, I would say it's a good way to get introduced to what many tourists and visitors call as Bali's most attractive ceremony. I would say that this film would be a good alternative for teaching people who are interested in Balinese culture and as supplemental material in understanding facts about Balinese cremation and culture. Um, I would say that this film offers you a closer and more intimate look on the way most Balinese cope with life and death. It helps you to understand the religious life and ritual practices of the Balinese. So I put here on the bullet points, there are some aspects of Balinese cultures that nicely demonstrated in this film. And if you happen to read some articles or books about the cremation ceremony in Bali, this film could help you to understand some of these concepts. So the first one is the religion and religious life of the Balinese. Like I mentioned before, the Balinese have this religion called Balinese Hinduism, where in the film you can see how they dress up for their rituals, like all the offerings that they made, and the sequence of the even for the Ngaben ceremony. This is how Balinese do it in general. Like they go to the cemetery, they dig the graveyard. In the graveyard, they dig the grave, they took the bones, wash it, and make effigy. And after that, they will take it again to the graveyard, and then they burn it. And after that, they put it in the coconut, the ashes in the coconut, and then they went to the river or to the beach to spread the ashes. So that's pretty much how they do it in Bali. So you got the visual of what you might read on in textbooks and stuff. And the other thing that I want to point out here, I want to go back to what I mentioned earlier, that Nyoman just like the majority of Balinese people, wanted to pay his debt the best way he can. So Balinese people believe that the relationship between parents and children are bound by debt. It is kind of more responsibility than that in Western perspective. But in Bali, we literally called it utang or debt. Each of us are in debt to God, to our teachers, and to our parents. And this concept is called Tri Rena, or literally translated as the three debts. And why did Nyoman and other Balinese have debt to their parents? It's simply because through their parents, they were born to this earth. And since they were born, the parents have the responsibility to make sure they raise the children properly, give them all their needs like food, shelter, clothes, and also they are responsible to hold all kind of ceremonies since the baby was born. So Balinese ritual for children started when the umbilical cord dried out, and then it's followed by Balinese birthdays, which happen twice a year according to Balinese calendar. And when the children grow bigger and become, say, teenager, there will be tooth filing ceremony. And after that, the last parents debt to their children is their wedding ceremony. And in return, children are expected to take care of their parents when they're no longer able to work. This including to hold the cremation ceremony when their parents died. So in different place and different cultures, sometimes people decided to get help from funeral agents, and it's not necessarily a responsibility of a child to take care of the cremation of their parents. But in Balinese life, it is the duty of the children, and this is why to get married and to have children is really important in the life of the Balinese. And it's also why when you see in that film, Nyoman was really emotional, and he wanted this ceremony to run smoothly and hoping that he did everything correctly so his father can get a good place by God's side. It's actually a proof, like doing this Ngaben ceremony is his way to prove that he had paid his debt to his father and that he has finished his duty as the son. And the other thing that you might have noticed in the film, Nyoman did not say that he wanted his father to go to heaven. Instead, he said, I want my father to get a good place close to God. So this is another belief that the Balinese have. We don't really have the concept of heaven and hell. What comes from God will return to God. What comes from the universe will return to the universe. So the basic thing about Ngaben is the concept of macrocosm and microcosm. So it's like the relationship between the macro and the micro. So the earth is the macro, and human bodies are the micros. When we died, we return everything back to nature, and the soul will return to its origin, which we believe is God. So next we will go to the next aspect of Balinese culture that we saw in the film, which is Karmapala. And I will talk about Karmapala and reincarnation at the same time because it's actually related. So these two key beliefs of the Balinese Hinduism, you can talk to any Balinese and they will tell you what they believe is Karmapala and reincarnation. Karmapala is where positive or negative behavior has the capacity to influence the fate of oneself or one's family member in the future. And reincarnation is the process of a soul's rebirth after death. I believe that everyone here is familiar with this concept because Hinduism and Buddhism talk a lot about it. But I want to talk a little bit about reincarnation in Balinese belief because it's a little bit different from the general Hindu or Buddhist concept that we know. As I said before, Balinese Hinduism is a mixture of Balinese animist spirituality and cosmology with Hindu beliefs and practices. There are some aspect of it that is closer to animism than to the universal Hinduism or say like Hindu practices that people have in India. Um, Balinese believe that when you die, your soul will reborn to a different body and start a new life. But they believe that what reborn is actually a small particle of your soul. Once you are cremated and have the final purification rituals, your soul actually stay in the family temple and join the soul of the past ancestors. So your descendants and the living family will pray to you because you are now their ancestor. And then your soul can reborn as a newborn baby in your clan or as new babies. So there's no limit of how many times your soul reincarnated into a new person. You could even reincarnate into two different people at the same time. Um, Next, we will talk about the last thing on the content of the film that I want to discuss with you all. It's the concept of personhood, grief, and emotion. So mid-film, we all see a quote from a famous anthropologist, Margaret Mead, who says, quote, "Parting with loved one is never emphasized and tears are inappropriate. Emotions that no Balinese display, tears as parting and death, broken heart," unquote. But in this film, you actually see how Nyoman cried, even passed out during the cremation ceremony. His sadness was crystal clear, and you can tell, and he even said it, that he missed his father's good face even 10 years after his death. So there are actually long-standing anthropological arguments about personhood and emotion that debated whether or not Balinese people express or even experience grief. So my question here is Margaret Mead wrong about the Balinese, or is it Nyoman that is not quite Balinese to show such emotions when anthropological research says it is not the nature of the Balinese? I think as somebody who was born and raised in Bali, I kind of understand what led to such conclusion that people made about the Balinese. The conversation of death is not something taboo or unusual for people in Bali. Since since young age, we are told that everybody will die. Parents would teach their children to take care of themselves in case their parents died when they're still young. So the way the older people describe death in Bali is actually saying that we're going home. We say mulih ke tanah waya, which means we're going back to the old land. So death is, in a sense, something that is expected. What follows this concept is then the concept of surrender to fate and destiny and the concept of acceptance. It is the destiny of those who are born to die, and it is the law of life. So, do we feel grief? Do we cry when someone in our family died? Yes, we do. Balinese individuals who experience all sort of emotions, they cry, they feel sad, they feel lost. But some people, like, it's really a personal choice to feel comfortable showing your grief in public or to keep it for yourself. Some people might think that cry in public would show that they are not yet able to accept the fate, but some others don't have problem in expressing their emotions. Um, there are many cremation ceremony in Bali that actually you could see family members crying out loud, passing out, and screaming because of their loss. So do I think Mid's statement is inaccurate? No. I actually think this is the importance of having some sort of supplementary material when we read text, especially when it's old and related to complex subjects like people and culture. So there's a big possibility that Mead happened to go to a place where people don't really show their grief, or maybe there's like the person that she was observing was not feeling comfortable with her being around and watch the procession. We don't know. And I don't know what happened back then, but I wouldn't say that her statement is inaccurate just because in reality some people cried. So the other thing that I think I will also explain through my personal experience of how important it is to have such a follow-up on research that has been done long time ago and observing complex subjects like people and culture. So I'm going to talk about my work and personal experience when I made film with Elemental Productions. I actually don't have film background and I wasn't trained in anthropology, but my undergrad in English language and literature make me also have the chance to work with documentary film company because they need translator, they need interpreter, and that's kind of my area. And I was also always interested in film and how people see cultures and their identity. I joined Elemental when I was in my last year of undergrad. And it's actually an eye-opening process for me personally. And it was one of the reasons why I made my decision 7 years later to come to UW-Madison and get my MA in Southeast Asian Studies. So I think sometimes we tend to think that we know our society and cultures better than anybody else because we were born and raised within that society. And then we tend to take things for granted. We don't see the value of something. We don't see the uniqueness of something in our society. But sometimes we also might, feel like we don't know what we know about our society because there are so many research and studies in the past which define who we are, and we think that what the scholars and researchers say about us is an absolute truth. I think I and probably many other Balinese was in that position. Westerners came to Bali since before 1900, and massive studies on Bali were conducted around that period. I remember in middle school, I had a class on Balinese social system and irrigation system. And this class was actually conducted fully in Indonesian language. The textbook was written in Indonesian and by Indonesian. But what interesting about that class is all the people that we quoted are foreigners. And all their research were done mostly in the 1930s. So my understanding about Balinese social system and irrigation system was based on the understanding of people like Clifford Geertz or Miguel Covarrubias. I then assume that every single farmers in every single village in Bali uh, have done their irrigation the way the experts explain on the books. I ignored the fact that Bali has changed so much since 1930s, and most importantly, there is a big possibility that what I believe to be true is probably a product of misunderstanding due to language barrier between these experts and the people that they study. So working with elemental production made me learn to watch and to listen. It is a like long learning process for me, and the hardest part of it is to put behind the knowledge that I assume I know about my people and let the people and the culture to speak for themselves. So I was made aware that to be able to understand the subject, I should come with open-mindedness and accept the differences that the film subjects offered me. Before before I work, I think in the beginning of my work with Elemental, I used to think that I could speak for the Balinese because I am one. Um, I used to think that how my family do rituals is the only correct way to do it. But then I met more people in the villages. I talked to more people during our filming process, and I started to realize that different places and different people in Bali do things differently in their own correct ways based on their village tradition. So it is really important to come to your film subject with not trying to tell them what is right, not assuming that what you're doing is right, what they're doing is wrong. So it's really a process where I should really learn how to listen and how to watch and accepting what other people do, which is different from what I or my family do. And the other really essential thing about studying culture and people that I learned through filmmaking is collaboration. Probably this is what people in the past did not have when they did their research in Bali, assuming that Indonesia just got their independence in 1949, and not many people in Bali can speak good Indonesian back then. So uh, I don't think many of them also could speak English or other languages that the researchers spoke back then. So it's probably one of the reason why when you read a text and then you thought like that's now not how it is and stuff, and that's why we need supplemental materials to understand those texts. And if you see the combination of people working in Elemental, you see on the picture that we're like people from different nationality and different social, cultural background. So I feel like when we're making film with Elemental, the language barrier is less of a problem. And also we come with different perspectives on things that allows us to understand things in multiple layers and point of views. In most projects that we did, we do have tags that became the basis of what we're looking for. For example, when we did Ngaben, we use meads, we use Clifford Geertz, the same as what we did with the cockfight film. We came with a piece from Clifford Geertz, and then we're trying to figure out what his telling us about Balinese cockfighting, and then we go to the field, and if we put that aside, we don't use that text to guide to define how the film should be, but we just use that as a basis knowledge of how we're going to get information from our film subjects. So when we go to the people, when we get their story, they speak to us in the language that they're most comfortable speaking. And we as a team would work together to understand the message that they're trying to give us. If we're not clear about something, we go back to the film subjects to explain it to us. And in the end, we would have them see the final result to make sure there's no misinterpretation. So this process actually allows us to better understanding the text and somehow help to clarify and to see changes and things that former scholars did not see or did not encounter during the time of their field research. So this is some pictures of elemental production when we're doing our film. We have everyone here of like different background, different point of view. So after we took this, we filmed this interview, we would go back and we discuss what we got from the field and see how we, if everyone understand it in the same way. And we also always have a crew briefing in the morning to see what we're going to do and to make sure everyone everyone knows what we're looking for, what we want to achieve that day. And our director always makes sure that we would come to the field and like being open to whatever result the interview would lead us to. So it's really a good experience for me to kind of see my culture and the people in a different way, and it helped me to understand what I always assume I know from the books I read. In conclusion, I think it is really important to utilize film like this and other form of multimedia in classroom teaching, especially today when everything is so based on audio and visual. And I took classes here in UW-Madison where professors use film to help students to comprehend the books that we read in class. And I think it's really helped, especially when the text is old and everything, like many things changes in the society, in the people and the cultures that this the author studying. Yeah, I think that's all from me. If you are interested in learning more about this topic and wanted to get some reading references, you can go to our website, Elemental Production, because we have study guide, which can help you to walk through the content of the film. Just feel free to visit the website and download the study guide that provided there. It's all for educational purpose and it's all free. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone who comes, and I look forward to hear your comments about the film and would be happy to answer a question that you may have about Bali and filmmaking. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Sri, very much. Applause by Zoom. You can't really hear it, but big round of applause. Thank you for the very interesting presentation that tells me things I never knew and opens up fascinating questions that you could easily discuss with kids of most ages. So, and that I think the study guide should be really useful. That's a very sophisticated website they have. So I would like to open up the floor for questions, and we have several options. You can type a question into the chat box and I'll read it aloud, or Sri could read it aloud, or you can raise your hand and we will call on you, or you can just jump in. So you want to turn on your video, obviously, and your audio, and go ahead and ask questions. And so we already have one comment. Great job, Sri. So there you go. Already a reaction there. I have several questions. So I'll jump in with questions at some point, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say, give you a minute to collect your thoughts. We have a question from Chris Hulseth. Are there any particular differences with the funeral ceremony in your village versus what we watched in the film?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In my village, in Jimbaran, I grew up in a fisherman village in south of Bali, which is pretty far from Klungkung, where Nyoman lives. We do have different way of doing the funeral ceremony. Like the place where they put the bones after they dug it from the grave, we don't have it as big as that, as fancy as that. We actually just like have it in the field, like close to the graveyard, and then we just built something like really small. And we normally have it with all the people in the village, not really individual, because we're doing it like in a mass cremation. And the other thing, also the effigies, because we're a fisherman village, we always use symbol like fishermen or fishes and stuff like that. So it's really like the characteristic of the village that we put there. And most people live there are also fishermen. So that's why the effigies look like fishermen and things that come from the sea.
Great, thank you. Then we have a question from Lois Anderson. The film which we watched, how many hours of film were used for this 15 to 20 minute film in creating it?
I would say it's a really long, actually we had really long hours of footage. We filmed it. So some of them like really the time when Nyoman had the funeral, right? Like it's like 3 to 4 days of preparation and the funeral, the cremation itself, and then the end. But there are like some patches that we need to fill in that on the day of the cremation we couldn't get some footages, so we got that the next year and stuff with different kind of different people's ceremonies which still related in the same village. So I would say like we have like almost hundreds of hours just to cut it into this small short film.
Great, thanks. And we have some really positive comments. Karen Ambrose says, powerful work that Elemental Productions is doing. Love the emphasis on questioning the anthropological, ethnographical work of the past, which, yeah, is really interesting. And then Leslie Bartlett asks, not a question, but a comment. The film reinforced for me how much COVID has disrupted our rituals for mourning, which is also necessary to healing. Yeah, and I have a question about that too, but I'm going to let Cindy Bryan ask her question. Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, I put in the chat earlier that I'm a middle school teacher in Madison. I teach at a bilingual middle school or dual language immersion school, and I actually teach Spanish. So I teach to the kids who don't participate in that program. I mean, you know, there's an English language section and a dual language immersion. I find this fascinating because every year I do for Spanish, I do like Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. I love the idea of teaching through a different culture what Dia de los Muertos is, because it's tired what we do every year. It's the same thing. So for me to go, I don't know, I confess I did not watch your film. I'm going to, because your talk was phenomenal. I want to see this. I love how you laid it out. I want to be able to share this with other colleagues at my school. I feel like this is appropriate for it, absolutely, for our kids in MMSD right now. And this is what we are focused on, defining culture in the public sector throughout our nation. Oh my gosh. You know, and we're not even talking about that horrible thing that happened yesterday in Georgia. You know, like in my school, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. I'm exhausted. I have a day off, but I just have to share this because I think it's important. A woman from my school, nobody said anything about the horrible news yesterday in Georgia. A woman from my school sent a message early in this morning that said, hey, this is terrible. We need to say something to our students about this horrible news. We have Hmong kids. We have kids of Southeastern Asian descent at our school. We need to acknowledge it. Our principals got on board, like there was a chain of events. Principals, people who don't normally speak in my school were speaking up, not everybody, and I didn't read all the emails because I'm tired and I'm teaching. But then the superintendent I just read like 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago made a statement on it. And that is huge change for MMSD. And so we are in this time of huge cultural change, sea change. I think universities know better than public schools, but we desperately need the work you're doing, and we desperately need it for K-12 teachers. So I applaud you, and I'm so grateful that I just stumbled upon, I'm exhausted from I finished at 3:40 and then I'm sure other teachers are here too, and we're just, you know, exhausted. I'm not even in the elementary school, so I'm not teaching in person. It's still tiring, but thank you. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm seeing there are no immediate questions popping in. So I would like to just follow on that to say, yeah, I mean, comparative analysis in general, just using comparisons is really fascinating for kids and helpful because then they can think about what they're experts on, which is their own culture. But I think, you know, currently these comparisons could be incredibly valuable. And in a time of COVID, you know, I had one question about the length of the ritual of the ceremonies, because I know in Sulawesi, in Tanah Toraja, they'll have these rituals go on for 2 weeks. And Americans, here's a question for discussion for kids of all ages, which is, what do we think about the difference between a culture where people stop, they travel distances, they stay for 2 weeks, or, you know, and Sri, I hope you tell me a little bit how much longer the ceremonies are in Bali. But in America, we're expected to move on fairly quickly. So COVID might change all that, but Sri, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think it's also affect what we're doing in Bali too, because I know that now, because of the COVID regulation, people are no longer able to gather, like mass gathering and stuff. And then Balinese ritual is all about being together. It's all about it's. I think like I would quote a little bit of what Geertz used to write about Balinese, that they're more orthopraxy than orthodoxy. So people like really rituals is really about like the practice, and then the time when you can gather with people and being there. And now with all this thing in COVID, I heard that people no longer come to funeral. People no longer come to the cremation. It's like really small scale of event that they just do what they think necessary, like, okay, we got the body, we have all the offerings, and we do the rituals, we burn it, and done. So it's pretty sad also right now in Bali. And I hope it will be over soon.
It'll be over soon. Yeah, Brandon Weisenhunt has a couple of observations.
Great talk. And I watched the video and I really enjoyed it. I liked that it was short too. That was really nice. But my observations were kind of along the lines of, one of the things that struck me was the kind of do-it-yourself nature of the cremation ceremony. Whereas in the United States, we pay people to do it and it's all kind of out of our hands. And you know, we outsource, if you will, the whole, everything to do with death. Kind of, it's a business like everything. It's kind of an observation. And two, you were talking earlier about the connection with Hinduism, and I was thinking of how it is I could be mistaken, but I believe in India, one of the occupations that was traditionally available to untouchables was the cremation of bodies. And it's interesting that people of all walks do that, or maybe I'm misled, in Bali. Those were kind of just my observations, random.
Yeah, wow. Again, it's this comparison that's really interesting, and I'm glad you were able to watch it. In just a moment, we'll have information on where I can find the video, which is what Cindy Bryan just asked. Very interesting film that, again, is short. And so I say, if you haven't had time, and teachers have so little spare time, I would maybe call it movie night and sit down with some popcorn and just watch it, and then watch something like another documentary, Tiger King. No, I don't recommend that. But Carmen has just put the information about the link in the Eventbrite registration, and she's going to share it again here. So watch for that before you peel off. We have time for maybe one more question. There's the link right there. Okay, well, it is reaching 5 o'clock, and I'm going to say thank you to everybody for coming, and thank you, Sri, for a really fascinating conversation. More thank yous are coming in to the chat box, and again, I recommend watching the film, and I hope you all have a really great, relaxing weekend. Oh, there's a question. Thanks. What is it in Balinese?
Suksema.
Sorry, what is it?
Suksema.
Ah, okay. So why don't you type that in so people can see how to spell it to everybody in the box. Okay, so again, thank you, everybody. And you can stick around for a few minutes and ask more questions if you like. I'll stay on. Sri might stay on if she can. And Carmen is there to get more information from at any time. That's Carmen Pitt. So thank you, everybody. Another round of applause.
Thank you.